He's here! It's too quiet, John. Expect the unexpected.
What the hell are you talking about?
Die Hard Vendetta, a first-person shooter that released for the GameCube all the way back in late 2002, is a bit of a mixed bag overall. Massively underperforming as it did on its initial release, later versions were eventually ported over to both the PS2 and Xbox a little over 6 months later, although surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly given its initial sales count, only in PAL regions. Why was this exactly? Why were NDA Productions, who were responsible for the game's European release, willing to give the green light to both an Xbox and PS2 version of the game, while Sierra Entertainment, their distributors over in the US, weren't, especially with both companies operating under that same Vivendi Universal umbrella as well? No one really has any clear answers to this either. Some reports suggest that Die Hard was simply a much bigger franchise overseas than it was in its native America, therefore presenting a much lower financial risk to NDA than it did to Sierra, a claim that surprisingly holds true in many regards. While Die Hard is without question an American franchise at its core, its popularity in regions such as Europe and Asia far surpassed that of its native homeland in terms of raw box office sales. Looking at the third movie in the franchise in particular, Die Hard with a Vengeance, shows us that the movie generated just over $100 million in the States, barely breaking that blockbuster threshold, and coming in, at least via some sources, as the 10th highest grossing movie of 1995. Compare this against its global sales, however, and Die Hard with a Vengeance came in at number 1, beating out Toy Story as the highest grossing movie of the year, and number 2 in my specific region, the UK and Ireland, only being edged out marginally by Batman Forever, grossing over $30 million in the process. I actually remember going to the cinema to see Batman Forever back in 1995 as well, along with all the other movies of the time, such as GoldenEye, etc. And I'm not sure what it was like for everyone else, but at my local multiplex at least, they were handing out free limited edition comic books for every Batman Forever movie ticket sold. They literally had to pay kids to go in and see that slop. But I can tell you, in terms of playground talk alone, that trailer of a bomb going off in a hazy downtown New York as summer in the city rolled over the top, everyone and their mother wanted to go in and see the latest Die Hard movie, with its 15 certificate unfortunately freezing out a lot of us who were simply too young at the time. However, what I can say with certainty, and I'm pretty sure I speak for the entire country when I say this as well, is we absolutely fucking love Die Hard in Ireland. Annual Christmas movie right across the country. I'm not exactly sure the reason why either. Maybe we love a good underdog story. Maybe it was the fact that the two best movies in the entire franchise were helmed by Irish-American director John McTiernan. Maybe it was the fact that Simon Gruber calls John McClane a dumb Irish flatfoot in the third movie as well.
You say you don't even like your brother?
There's a difference, between not liking one's brother and not caring when some dumb Irish flatfoot drops him out of a window.
Whatever it was, though, Die Hard was an absolutely monster franchise in the UK and Ireland, as well as most of Europe as well. So it was a little surprising to see a game with a Die Hard title on it fail to connect with the public to such a large degree. Today we're going to find out exactly why that was, why Die Hard Vendetta was unable to capture either the magic of the movies or indeed its more illustrious PlayStation 4-bear Die Hard trilogy either, with Trilogy selling well over 2 million units by the end of 1999, along with being the third best-selling title in the UK for 1996, behind only FIFA 97 and Tomb Raider. Die Hard Vendetta, meanwhile, shipped just 120,000 copies globally, according to reports. Just 6% of Die Hard Trilogy's numbers. Figures well short of what was expected by both Fox Interactive and Vivendi Universal respectively. However, did it deserve this fate, or perhaps it does warrant a fresh pair of eyes and a more modern reappraisal? In this video we're going to find out exactly why Die Hard Vendetta died so hard with consumers, and whether there's anything in the game that still holds up today. Die Hard Vendetta originally started out life as Muzzle Velocity, an N64 first-person shooter developed by Bit Studios, who already had a good working relationship with Nintendo, developing titles for both the Super Nintendo and Game Boy during earlier generations. Muzzle Velocity was to be an original IP for the studio, with the player taking on the role of Jack, second name lost to history, a hardened LA SWAT team member who is sent into a downtown area that is being overrun by dangerous criminal gangs. Only 2 levels were ever conceived for the game, according to reports, and it was during this initial development cycle that Fox Interactive stepped in and wished to partner up with Bit Studios in creating a movie tie-in for one of their more established franchises. However, far from Die Hard seeming the obvious choice in this regard, Fox Interactive instead wanted Bit Studios to create a first-person shooter based on their upcoming summer 1997 blockbuster Speed 2 Cruise Control, which after the first movie grossed 10 times its original budget, Fox Interactive was sure was going to be another monster hit. Only it wasn't. Keanu Reeves famously declined to star in the sequel due to a variety of different reasons, one of which supposedly was that the movie was to be set on a slow cruise ship rather than an out-of-control bus like the first movie, which Keanu rightly pointed out makes, no sense in a movie titled Speed. And it's a shame the producers didn't listen to him either, as Speed 2 absolutely bombed at the box office, proving to be an enormous commercial flop for Fox in the process. After Speed 2's dismal box office performance, Fox Interactive wanted Bit Studios to pivot to one of their more successful franchises instead, namely Die Hard, a franchise that they'd found success with in the past with Die Hard Trilogy, as well as Alien Trilogy doing well for Fox also on the PlayStation, with a Die Hard 64 release seeming like an obvious next move. Now, the prototype build for Die Hard 64 was leaked online back in 2017, and to be honest, it looks a lot like the final version we got on the GameCube just a few years later. Glenn Plant, over on his N64 channel, did a full live stream of the prototype dumps of Die Hard 64, and it's well worth checking out if you're into, witnessing a piece of gaming history. I've left a link to that particular video, plus Glenn's channel down in the description below. However, with the game undergoing so many rapid changes and reskins, along with the team building a completely new engine for the upcoming title also, it was fairly inevitable that some delays would start to creep in, and as the millennium approached and N64 sales started to dwindle, focus instead switched over to the upcoming Project Dolphin, which would of course go on to become the Nintendo GameCube, with its development offering the studio a much beefier engine in which to create the Die Hard game they'd always envisioned. However, with a new console generation came new hardware demands, especially on Bits' outdated and underperforming engine, which had to be retooled drastically from its N64 days. Not only that, but original GameCube project designer for Die Hard Vendetta, Danny Carr, who had first conceptualized a much more cinematic first-person experience for Die Hard Vendetta, similar in vein to something like Call of Duty or Chronicles of Riddick, left the project in late 2001, with his replacement Mario Aguirre instead wanting to do a complete 180 on that design choice and opt for a much more hybrid approach. According to reports, Aguirre was a huge fan of the Thief series and wanted those stealth mechanics implemented in Die Hard Vendetta to run alongside the first-person shooter base game. On top of this, after the global box office phenomenon that was The Matrix, Aguirre also wanted bullet time put into the game to capitalize on all those new trends that were starting to take place in the industry. Obviously, this only lengthened Die Hard Vendetta's development time even further, and by the time Die Hard Vendetta eventually released for the GameCube in November 2002, Max Payne had already been out in store shelves almost 18 months at that point, so it was fair to say that most reviewers, as well as most of the public at large, assumed that Die Hard Vendetta's revolutionary bullet time mechanic was effectively just a cheap knockoff of what they'd already seen many times before. Not only that, but with the release of Die Hard Nakatomi Plaza just a few months earlier over on PC, a game that received mainly mixed to negative reviews, to release 2 first-person shooters based on the exact same IP just a few months apart, even if they were separated by hardware, that's just not a good business model in fairness, and likely hurt Die Hard Vendetta's chances even further, releasing into a market that was already dominated by the likes of Halo, Timesplitters, and Medal of Honor respectively. The final nail in Die Hard Vendetta's coffin was arguably the fact that Fox Interactive and Sierra Entertainment failed to push the game over in the States. Fox Interactive, despite their enormous success with the original Die Hard trilogy on PlayStation, had been burned on Nintendo's console previously with their aggressively marketed Fox Sports College Hoops 99, an N64 exclusive, which sold miserably, shifting just 250,000 units globally, leading them to becoming understandably rather gun-shy in terms of heavily investing for their next major project. Whatever the eventual reason was for Die Hard Vendetta's commercial failure, today we're going to find out whether the game itself still holds up after almost 24 years since its original release. Before we get into the story, mechanics, gameplay, and all the rest of that good stuff for Die Hard Vendetta, I would just like to give a quick shout out to everyone who has supported the channel through liking and subscribing to the videos. It's a huge help to me personally, and a sign that, putting these videos together actually means something. So with that said, now let's get back to the video. As always, spoilers ahead for 2002's GameCube first-person shooter Die Hard Vendetta. Now, Die Hard Vendetta itself are spread across 12 missions, with each of them being fairly unique in what they offer as well. The game itself takes place 5 years after the events of the movie Die Hard with a Vengeance, with the older yet, still not so wiser John McClane relocating to LA to be closer to his daughter Lucy McClane, who is by now an LAPD officer in her own right. The game starts us off with a police training exercise similar to those early training levels in both Deus Ex and Splinter Cell, giving us an overview of the controls and letting us, try out some moves before throwing us into the game proper. And unfortunately, this is where the first cracks of the game start to show themselves. Gunplay-wise, the game is fine, if a little too easy with the auto-aim picking up a lot of the slack, but during the stealth sections of this game, especially during this opening police level, it really does start to drag. And you'll be hearing, you've been spotted, John, come back to the start more than a few times, unless, you're some kind of ropey controlled stealth master. Not only this either, but the completely inadequate platform sections of the game really don't help matters either, arguably being even worse than the stealth sections are, and you really do have to wonder why they decided to implement ideas from the Thief series of all franchises into a first-person shooter based on Die Hard. This is something that even the best games have struggled with, to be fair. I recently played through Chronicles of Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay on the original Xbox, and while I enjoyed the game overall, its atmosphere, its story, and especially graphics for the time were simply incredible. The game still had issues. The gunplay was serviceable at best. The hand-to-hand combat, which makes up a sizable portion of that game, I really didn't enjoy it at all. The hitboxes seemed to be all over the place. And the stealth sections, while possibly being its strongest element, were still well short of what you would expect to find in elite-level stealth games such as, Thief, Dishonored, Splinter Cell, and so on. And to be honest, even the best games of all time have struggled to balance multiple different genres into the one experience. Deus Ex is, at least for me, obviously on the Mount Rushmore of gaming, but even I have to admit that, its stealth, its gunplay, even some of its role-playing elements, aren't exactly top tier when compared against games focusing explicitly on those areas. For Die Hard Vendetta, this balancing act is compounded even further by the fact that its lead character isn't exactly the silent but deadly type. This isn't Riddick striking from the dark, it's not the mysterious shadow agent J.C. Denton or, even Sam Fisher working for Third Echelon. This is Dirty Vest John McClane, for fuck's sake, everyone's unluckiest New York cop. No one wants to play a Die Hard game where you're forced to balance across beams during platforming sections, hide behind crates from roaming sentries. I would have thought this would have been fairly obvious to any fan of the Die Hard series. Give me some guns, give me some, German terrorists hunting for gold, and, let me at them. In its defense, the first level proper of the game kind of fools us into thinking that's exactly what we're going to get here when Piet Gruber, Hans Gruber's son, the villain from the original movie, takes hostages inside the local art museum as he looks to loot some priceless artworks. Of course, McClane's daughter Lucy is one of those police officers taken hostage inside the museum, so it's our job as a dad to break police protocol and go in all guns blazing to get her out. This is where the game is obviously at its best, in my opinion. Die Hard Vendetta allows you to dual wield two guns at the same time. You know, and honestly, mowing down bad guys to the sound of Ode to Joy, that's exactly what I signed up for here. And it really does give you some sense like you're playing as the famous New York cop. On top of this, it's always good to see recurring characters pop up from the movies as well. Characters such as reporter Dick Thornburg.
Asshole.
As well as Captain Al Powell also.
Powell here.
With the cheesy one-liners and the overly simplistic plot in place, of course it has to be Hans Gruber's son who shows up as the main villain. We finally step foot inside the museum itself with a conveniently timed explosion behind us now blocking the main entrance of the museum, meaning we're now effectively on our own with no backup to help us out. Honestly, though, I was fine with all these cliched plot points and, corny delivery, as again, it fit perfectly with the whole Die Hard spirit. Once we blast our way to the rear of the museum and rescue Lucy, mowing down dozens of bad guys via that slow-mo bullet time as well, John McClane is put back out on patrol on Hollywood Boulevard in the very next mission, something I was a bit confused by in all honesty, as, do senior detectives go out on patrol? I realise it would be a bit of a boring game if you were stuck behind your desk doing paperwork for 12 hours, but I thought they could have come up with a better plot device than, John, go out and walk the beat. While out on routine patrol, the precinct radios in after a couple of minutes saying there's been a multiple homicide in a diner just down the street. Again, this would have made a lot more narrative sense for me just to have McClane go straight there from LAPD headquarters as a detective instead of this bizarre whole 5-minute patrol backstory. That said, our mission is to track down and eliminate these gang members with probably one of the weirdest sections in the entire game as well, having McClane dress up as a gang member in order to infiltrate their hideout. I mean, some 50-year-old white guy rocking up with a bandana, I'm sure that's not going to raise any suspicions.
How do you do, fellow kids?
You don't have to eliminate every gang member you see either. The game does have a hostage mechanic in place that lets you grab an NPC from behind in order to gain useful information. This is even required in some parts as well, but by and large, I didn't end up using this mechanic all that much, as the information they provide can be easily found on your own, and with the wonky stealth physics baked in on top, it just wasn't worth my time. Once inside the hideout, McClane finds out that the stolen artwork from the museum has made its way over to the nearby Chinese theatre. Making our way over there, being sure, of course, to stop in and make sure there were no pesky gang members hiding out in the women's changing rooms.
I'm not a burger.
Let it not be said that John McClane leaves any stone unturned in his pursuit of justice. Making our way over to the Chinese theatre, and the fourth of the game's many issues, behind its platforming, its stealth, its, bizarre storytelling, begins to raise its head here, and namely these pretty numerous insta-kill game over. Simply walking through the starting doors of this mission triggers a bomb, which takes out the poor usher in the foyer, and this is like 3 seconds into the mission as well. There's simply no way you're going to know about this unless you've already played through the mission at least once, which is simply bad game design. This happens constantly throughout the game as well. Enemies placed directly behind your position, these no-warning bombs we've just mentioned, NPCs you're guiding along getting taken out completely out of your control. Die Hard Vendetta is a game as much about trial and error and memorizing scripted pathways through the level as it is about skill or ability, and that, that's really not a good thing to have in a first-person shooter. Blasting our way through the Chinese theatre sees us follow Arnold Schwarzenegger wannabe Jack Frontier and the curator of the museum Christoph von Laban into the subway tunnels and sewers of old LA, with McClane getting a pretty good laugh at Frontier along the way.
What happened? Thought I heard something. Look, I've let von Laban fall behind us. He's become a liability. Kill him. Roger, no problem. You sound a little hoarse. I might be catching a cold. It's a little damp down here. Ah, don't worry, Rico. Soon you'll be lying on a beach earning 20%. I always wanted one of these.
This subway part can be a little bit tricky though, as you try and navigate your way through the tunnels and don't have all that much time to avoid the oncoming trains either, especially with the fiddly double tap to lie flat controls that the game has in place. Once we catch up to Von Leben, who it seems has outlived his usefulness with Gruber and Frontier.
Pumped up testosterone-fueled moron. Don't you realize how serious this is? Who changed the plans?
I'll let you get away with that once. Just once. And I'd ask yourself, what more do you have to offer us?
It's off down to the sewers in order to escape. Now, as anyone who has played pretty much any video game in history before knows, the worst section in almost any video game, especially a video game from the early to mid 2000s as well, is the almost obligatory sewer level. Think Vampire the Masquerade as a prime example of this. So, of course, Die Hard Vendetta had to put in its own tedious sewer level, and not even content with just that either, adding on a host of irritating extras on top. Ask anyone the second worst mission type behind sewer levels in video games, and they'll likely tell you escort missions. Guess what? That's exactly what you're going to have to do here as well, escorting the criminally slow Von Leben through a labyrinthian maze. And yes, another little bonus extra for you here. The sewer is a maze. Oh, to joy indeed. With the final cherry on top of this absolute shit show of a level being the fact that the sewers are in complete darkness, meaning you're forced to wear these dollar store, pound shop kind of night vision goggles just to see 2 foot in front of your face. At least the sight of Von Leben jumping like an absolute fanny along the way might give you a small chuckle during all of this drudgery.
Okay, now jump, quick, we're wasting time.
Give me some room.
That's pathetic.
With Von Leben now in custody, one of the better levels in the game actually plays out here as Frontier and Gruber launch an all-out assault on Century City Police Headquarters. Cops are getting absolutely mowed down throughout this level at a pretty rapid rate.
This is a war zone.
With all of the station's security systems now in the hands of the terrorists. As a result, we're forced to release 2 prisoners from lockup that may be able to help us regain control of the station. The first of these is an ultra-slow computer hacker who takes an absolute age to walk anywhere. Thankfully, once he finally does reach his destination, he's able to take back control of all the cameras and security door locks for us, seemingly frozen in place as he does so.
You okay, buddy?
The second of these 2 prisoners is a bomb expert, Latino gangster Nitric, who manages to disarm the bomb on the front entrance of the police station for us, only to then go on and betray us for Gruber and Frontier, kidnapping Lucy in the process. With Von Leben now dead, after being shot down by Gruber during his escape, McClane chases the trio to an old Hollywood studio lot where even more of the stolen artwork has ended up. McClane's old pal Al Powell shows up at this point to tell us to go home, assuring McClane that the police have it all in hand, but considering this guy was trussed up like a Christmas turkey just 1 mission ago, I think we'll be ignoring that order. Again, there's some decent fun to be had in the studio level with all of the different sets on display, the surface of the moon, a medieval castle and so on, with even a sniper section thrown in at one point as well, which all do provide some light relief. But once again, the game decides to descend into these absolutely inane stealth segments that it's just not equipped to deal with. And they end up ruining the whole flow of the mission. Once McClane makes it through the Hollywood set, Gruber and Frontier manage to escape with Lucy yet again, with McClane taking out his frustration on an overmatched Nitric. The boss fights in this game are ridiculously easy though, with you strafing left and right often being enough to take them down without issue, with, pretty much the only slight challenge in the game being the final boss fight in the observatory. Due to McClane breaking police protocol, however, and causing damage to an up-and-coming young Hollywood starlet's makeup trailer in the process, our good friend Captain Al takes our gun and our badge.
John, you shouldn't have been here.
Look, Al, I can't sit around waiting to hear what's happened to Lucy.
Yeah, well, you know that trailer you demolished? It contained Jessie Montana.
Yeah, we met earlier.
She's got a lot of clout, John. The studio's insurance company is going apeshit, and she's pressing assault charges. I hate to do this to you, man, but I gotta lock you up till we can clear this up. I need your badge and gun.
Shipping us off to prison in the process, and, you know, I literally saved all of your worthless asses over the previous couple of missions, and this is how you repay me.
That's bullshit.
Once in prison, it turns out the tuna is actually some kind of superfood, with our old pal Nitric looking particularly good after surviving our assault back on the Hollywood lot. Now, not to get off course here too much, but many years ago I used to work for a large electrical retailer in the UK and Ireland named Currys. Shout out to all the Currys massive still out there. I was one of the warehouse staff, and back when the 7th generation of consoles first launched, named the Xbox 360, Currys ended up doing a massive clear out of old gaming stock, mainly for employees, mostly shop display stuff as well, monitors, consoles, controllers, that kind of stuff. And, you know, of course, games. Now, I had been a PS2 owner during the generation first. I eventually traded that in after a year or two for an Xbox, which, you know, is still one of my favourite consoles of all time. But up until that point, I had never owned a Nintendo GameCube yet. You know, here was Currys basically giving it to me for nothing and being nice enough to throw in a few games on top, one of which was, of course, the aforementioned Die Hard Vendetta. Now, this was all over 20 years ago at this point, yet I do distinctly remember getting to this prison part of the game because I remember I didn't get any further in the game. Now, why that was seemed kind of lost to time. You know, maybe I changed jobs, I went to uni around that time, maybe I had other shit to do, other great games to play and so on. But upon replaying this prison level for this review, all those horrible memories finally came rushing back, and I suddenly remembered why I'd basically thrown this game in the trash, despite it costing me the equivalent of about 20 pence.
Yes, here's a quarter.
The sad fact is, and something I actually didn't realise at the time was, it's not even just this level either that's frustrating. It's basically the entire second half of the game, with Die Hard Vendetta almost branching off into two completely different games once you hit this prison section. Playing the first half of the game, you're thinking, you know, yeah, this game is nothing special. You know, it's definitely no Halo, Half-Life or GoldenEye, but it's fairly serviceable in parts. And to be honest, it pretty much delivers on what it sets out to do. You do feel like John McClane in parts, 2 Uzis in hand, you know, mowing down bad guys in the museum, subway or wherever, all to the sound of Ode to Joy no less. And if the game had have continued in this vein for a while longer, I probably would have given it, you know, a bog standard 5.5 or 6 out of 10. However, from the start of the Sierra Correctional Facility level onwards, which, you know, is just over the halfway point of the game, if we discount the fairly lackluster police training level, you know, back at the start, this game absolutely sucks. Like, it's not just bad, it's terrible, you know, in almost every conceivable way as well. And if we're talking about the second half of the game, you know, in some sort of vacuum, I'd honestly struggle to give it anything more than a 2, and even that might be generous. For some reason, this is the part of the game that the developers decide to ramp up the stealth and platforming mechanics massively, and if I heard Prisoner on the Loose one more fucking time, I think I would have completely lost it. Inching your way along the corridor like some sort of geriatric mole, you're forced to take down 2 guards from behind on 2 different levels, one above and one below, with their field of view being on par with Hawkeye or something. Just ridiculous field of vision. However, I have to say I did actually find it pretty funny watching this guy right here taking a shit while, you know, you take one of the guards hostage. Like, not a care in the world. That's some real OG shit right there. After a white knuckle elevator ride plus some crazies on the loose as well.
That looks painful.
We can finally escape the facility Shawshank style via a conveniently placed poster on the wall. Very original, of course. Suffice to say, I'm skipping over huge sections of this level, both for your sake and mine, as it took me almost 1 hour and 10 minutes to get through this abysmal level. So me brushing over it all here in about 15 seconds, please consider that a blessing. With McClane now out of prison and taking care of Nitric in the process, Big Al meets us on the roof, gives us our gun and badge back with a little pat on the back as well, saying, you know, it's okay, John, let's get you out of here. No, it's not okay, Al. Never mind that this level should be up there in Guantanamo Bay as some kind of torture device. You put McClane in prison for basically nothing after he saved your ass consistently for half the game. I don't understand who McClane isn't more pissed about this.
Then why aren't you angry?
I'd like to say it gets better, but it really doesn't. In fact, if anything, the game actually gets progressively worse, as all of the next few levels are predominantly stealth and platforming levels. And again, it's just crazy to me that this wasn't play-tested and changed. No one wants to play a game as fucking John McClane and sneak through shadows and jump over boxes. If I wanted to play a stealth game, I'd play a competent one. You know, like Thief or Splinter Cell or Dishonored, one that actually knew what it was doing instead of going through this wonky shite. Anyway, it turns out that Gruber is in league with the Yakuza, who offer him some, you know, fancy missile tech in exchange for the artwork that he stole earlier. Weapons which will allow Gruber to, wait for it, drum roll please, blackmail the city into giving him $1 billion. $100
billion! Oh.
To be fair though, while it is a little hokey, a little over the top, these are actually the parts of the game that I most enjoy. You know, Hans Gruber's son showing up to demand $1 billion off the city government while McClane blasts his way through dozens of his henchmen. That's literally all I wanted from this game, yet instead, in the second half of it, it turns into some kind of Banjo-Kazooie Tenchu hybrid. No one asked for that. The following mission after the Yakuza Tuna Factory, however, is undoubtedly its worst. I can't even believe we haven't even reached rock bottom yet. So, you know, here we are, strap in. This is, of course, the infamous Fernandez warehouse mission. And there were times during this mission that I honestly didn't think I'd be able to finish the rest of this review. Jumping across forklifts, inching across high-rise balance beams, the whole level absolutely sucks ass, and it's made even worse by the retarded controls of the game as well, which, for whatever reason, forward and backwards seems okay, but side-to-side movement, for, again, whatever reason, McClane moves about 100 miles per hour, which is obviously hilarious when you're straddled on a 1-inch beam across an insta-kill drop zone. Tweaking the controls didn't seem to help either, so, you know, on I had to soldier. The fun didn't stop there though. Oh no, these insta-death mandatory jumping sections now evolved onto jumping across crates with you failing a single jump. And believe me, you will, seeing you getting crushed by a forklift over and over again.
Make it stop!
Make it past this dumpster fire of a segment though, and your reward is a section where you have to run across some balloons. Yes, you heard that right. John McClane running across some balloons in a warehouse. Won't someone please stop this ride and let me off? Thankfully, with only 2 missions left, I decided to see it out with some, you know, old school guardroom drum and bass cheering me up slightly.
Can you turn that down? What? This tune is kicking it.
The next level after the Fernandez warehouse really should have been the game's high point. Probably the reason most people actually picked up the game, in fairness, namely the return to Nakatomi Plaza. And to be fair to the game, it does decide to tone down the stealth and platforming mechanics at least a little for this one, allowing us to finally go back all guns blazing like we should have been doing throughout the last few levels. There are some nice nods to the movie in this level also, with the full-scale model of the tower on display, as well as the zigzag tables McClane hides under in the movie here as well. Of course, I tried to find old buddy Harry Ellis's office while I was up here as well, yet sadly to no avail.
The guy upstairs is fucking things up, huh? I can give him to you.
After mistakenly getting my Father of the Year award and shooting Lucy by mistake at point blank range, We eventually make it up to the roof where Piet Gruber goes out like an absolute wet wipe. And look, I realise the Grubers aren't meant to be some kind of all-action heroes, but you can't treat the series' main villains in such a disrespectful manner. You know, you have to at least give them a proper send-off. This is just embarrassing.
I warned you, McClane. Now you'll pay with your daughter's life. No, 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 die. Why don't you just die?
That was pathetic.
With Gruber now gone, we're left with Jack Frontier as our main antagonist of the game, with him escaping to the nearby Holmes Observatory where they're premiering the new movie Thief Galaxy 3. Now, back at the start of the game, a newsreel played during one of the cutscenes which highlighted that Jack Frontier, who was a former professional soldier and strongman, played the starring role in Galaxy Thief 1. The movie pretty much surprised everyone by doing really well at the box office, supposedly fooling Frontier into thinking he was now some kind of Hollywood A-lister, yet when its sequel inevitably bombed, the studio fired Frontier on the spot, and he's been on a revenge mission ever since. Now, that plot point is fine on its own, but, you know, I kind of did enjoy Piet Gruber's villain arc here, being the son of Hans Gruber, demanding $1 billion from the top of Nakatomi Plaza. You know, it was hokey, sure, it was a bit pantomimish, but it was exactly what this game needed. But to have all of that as some kind of fake out where the real reason the bad guys have amassed all of these missile weapons is because Frontier is annoyed that he got overlooked for some movie role. You know, again, this game can't help but shoot itself in the foot. And it's made even funnier by the fact as well that Frontier actually laughs at McClane during the warehouse level, telling John there's a much darker reason for the weapons than the simple ransom demand that Piet gave the city government.
Oh, sure.
The Holmes Observatory level is the final level of the game, and the difficulty really ramps up here as well, with you having to take on fully armoured mercenaries as well as a helicopter gunship barely 30 seconds into the level. On top of this, you're forced to disarm 4 strategically placed bombs throughout the level, with the timer on each one being fairly tight as well, which, you know, can sneak up on you if you're not expecting it. Once we make it through all the mercenaries, the hostages and the bombs, we face off against Frontier himself for the final showdown, with a funny little scene actually taking place just beforehand between him and Castle, the guy who would eventually go on to replace him for that starring role. Frontier is tougher than the rest of the enemies in the game, no question, but still goes down without too much of a fight, with your biggest obstacle here being the bomb timer, which starts immediately after Frontier goes down, giving you 25 seconds to escape from the building before it explodes. With McClane escaping the building and reuniting with his daughter Lucy, the game finally wraps up, with this being the final Die Hard game ever released on a home console. Wonder why? So does Die Hard Vendetta still hold up? In conclusion, no. Both Eurogamer and GameSpot gave this game a 4 and 4.8 out of 10 respectively. That's largely how I seen the game as well. You know, like I said earlier, the game starts off okay, nothing amazing obviously, but at least up until the halfway point of the game, that Sierra Correctional Facility, you know, I would have given the game around a 6 out of 10 if it had have stopped at that point. But that level combined with the Tuna Factory level, and without doubt the worst level in the entire game, that Fernandez warehouse level, those deserve a 2 out of 10 at best. Fernandez warehouse probably a 1, so on aggregate, yeah, I agree. I give this game about a 4 out of 10, pretty much in line with all the rest of the media outlets. Again, of course, IGN had to be the one outlier, giving the game an undeserved 6.3 out of 10, with the majority of their review focusing predominantly on the second level of the game as well, the Hollywood Boulevard level. So for those of you who watched my Shadowgate 64 review a few months back, you know, let's just say that this is another huge red flag for me in terms of the depth of IGN's review policy. At its best, like the Police HQ level or even the Nakatomi Plaza level in parts, Die Hard Vendetta does let you feel like you're John McClane, you know, blasting bad guys with dual-wielding pistols while, you know, Ode to Joy rings out in the background. But at its worst, this game is an absolute travesty. And whoever gave the green light for implementing the stealth and platforming sections of this game seriously needs to take a long, hard look at themselves in the mirror. They are truly terrible to play through. It's like this game was never even play tested, and basically an insult to all die-hard fans everywhere as well. You know, this is definitely not what you would have wanted from a die-hard video game experience. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments section below about Die Hard Vendetta. Thankfully, you lucky American PlayStation and Xbox owners were spared the pain of this release. But if you were a GameCube owner, or even worse, a continental European, please reach out. My pain is your pain, and, you know, we can all commiserate together how they massacred our boy.
Look what they did to my Santino.
As always, until the next one, stay safe. Hauling out.